Most people enter 2026 chasing shadows. They believe wealth is a prize awarded to the loudest sufferer, the ones waking up at 4 a.m., or subjecting themselves to performative rituals like polar plunging. It is a fundamental misunderstanding of how the world works. True wealth isn't a reward for intensity. It is the output of a superior system. 9 years ago, I stopped being a laborer in my own life and started becoming the architect. I transitioned from financial noise to total sovereignty before the age of 30 by focusing on micro protocols that compound. If you want 2026 to be the year you achieve escape velocity, you don't need a new hustle. You need a better operating system. The first protocol to install is the bi-weekly energy audit. Most people misdiagnose their burnout. They think they are tired because they work too many hours, but that's rarely the case. Burnout is a system failure caused by a lack of energy ROI. You aren't exhausted because you're working. You're exhausted because you're spending your highest value currency on tasks that offer a negative return. Data from the Harvard Business Review confirms that elite performers don't just manage their time, they treat their energy as their primary capital. Time is a fixed asset, but cognitive energy is your leverage. When you rely on random spikes of motivation to push through draining tasks, you are building your future on a volatile foundation. To fix this, turn your calendar into a diagnostic sensor. For the next 14 days, log every activity you perform. The moment a task is finished, don't overthink it, simply label it based on its impact on your cognitive battery. Mark it red if it is a liability that drains your reserves. Mark it yellow if it is neutral maintenance. Mark it green if it is a high leverage asset that leaves you sharper than when you started. We aren't looking for one-off events. We are hunting for recurring patterns of systemic friction. Once you identify a red task, you apply the first sovereign fix: tactical batching. Most people let energy draining tasks scatter across their week like a virus, constantly contaminating their focus. You must learn to isolate the poison. For example, I realized that handling logistical microtasks and shallow communications throughout the day was a constant tax on my creative alpha. Instead of letting these tasks interrupt my high-value work, I quarantined them. I batched every logistical friction point into a single maintenance window on Tuesday afternoons. By containing the drain to a specific block of time, you protect the integrity of the hours where your real wealth is actually created. If batching is about containment, the second fix is systemic optimization. You need to look at the anatomy of your red tasks and identify the specific friction point. Often, it's not the objective itself that drains you, but the method of execution. If you find that synchronous meetings are depleting your cognitive battery, you don't just endure them, change the protocol. Transition to an asynchronous communication model. Use AI-driven documentation tools to summarize hours of discussion into 5 minutes of high-density data. Move your interactions to text-only platforms where you can control the pace. By shifting from a reactive human-centric workflow to a leveraged system-centric one, you can often flip a red task into a neutral, yellow, or even a green asset. The final and most potent strategy is surgical elimination. In the early stages of my media business, I realized I was spending 15 hours a month on brand negotiations and contract revisions. These were high stakes but low fulfillment. They were the primary source of my system's drag. Once I reached a certain level of scale, I realized the opportunity cost of doing these tasks myself was far too high. I brought in a specialist to own that entire vertical. This isn't just hiring, it's buying back your life force. Every hour you spend on a task that drains you is an hour stolen from the activities that actually build your empire. While you may not be able to eliminate every liability today, you must treat every red task on your calendar as a problem to be eventually solved, not a burden to be permanently carried. This leads us to the second habit, the capital preservation protocol. Building a sovereign net worth isn't just about maximizing the top line income. It's about guarding the fortress. Most people are focused on earning more, while their wealth is quietly bleeding out of the back door through systemic leaks. It's a tragedy of small numbers. The average adult is currently hemorrhaging over $1,000 a year on subscriptions, with a significant portion of that going to services they no longer even use. They are paying a hidden tax on their own lack of observation. Even if you consider yourself disciplined, your system is likely under attack from subscription creep. A few years ago, I audited my own accounts and discovered I was still paying $400 a month for a high-end data research terminal I hadn't logged into for 6 months. I had signed up for a trial to research a specific investment, the trial ended, and the system began its silent extraction. Because I wasn't auditing the flow, that leak would have continued indefinitely. You cannot build a massive skyscraper on a foundation full of holes. If you don't know exactly where your capital is flowing, you aren't an investor. You're just a spectator in your own financial life. I once fell victim to a classic systemic exploit. I had signed up for a high-end strategic research service, a promotion that offered thousands of dollars worth of data for a fraction of the cost. I used the data, extracted the value, and promptly initiated the cancellation protocol. Or so I thought. Months later, I discovered the system had continued to trigger a $250 recurring charge. Because I wasn't auditing the flow, that parasitic leak was quietly draining my capital in the background. It didn't matter how much I was earning. My fortress had a hole in it. To prevent this, you must implement a quarterly capital reconnaissance. Stop checking your bank balance like a consumer and start auditing it like a forensic accountant. Every 90 days, export your last 3 months of financial data into a spreadsheet. This is your raw system log. By applying a simple conditional formatting formula to highlight recurring transactions, you can instantly visualize every auto-pay algorithm currently tethered to your accounts. You are looking for anything that does not provide a direct, measurable return on investment. Once you identify these leaks, you don't just cancel, you negotiate. If you find a charge for a service you haven't utilized, reach out to their support architecture. Frame it as a system error, inform them that the service was inactive, and request a full recuperation of the lost capital. In the majority of cases, companies will authorize a refund rather than lose a potential future client. For the services you actually keep, never accept the standard rate. If a promotional period has expired, initiate a conversation to reenact the original terms or seek a more efficient alternative. This isn't about being frugal. This is about maintaining the integrity of your capital. Just as a high-performance engine requires regular maintenance to prevent friction and overheating, your financial system requires a periodic purge of unnecessary drag. If you allow these micro leaks to persist, you aren't building wealth, you're just pouring water into a bucket with no bottom. You must treat your personal finances as a controlled environment where every dollar has a specific strategic purpose. This next protocol might be controversial, but it is essential for anyone seeking to optimize their cognitive bandwidth. You must stop creating to-do lists. Instead, you need to implement a high-leverage focus protocol. For years, I operated under a flawed framework. I would end my day by jotting down every minor task and perceived obligation into a massive running list. Every morning, I would wake up and attempt to battle my way through this wall of text. The problem is that these chaos lists are designed for failure. When you inevitably fail to cross off 20 different items, your brain subconsciously categorizes the day as a system error. This creates a destructive feedback loop where a perceived failure leads to diminished motivation, which leads to further systemic collapse. In his work, Deep Work, Cal Newport highlights a fundamental truth. High-quality output is the result of focused intensity, not fragmented activity. In the Sovereign framework, we prioritize the signal over the noise. Doing fewer things with surgical precision moves the needle further than doing a dozen things poorly. My solution was to separate my capture list from my execution protocol. I still maintain a running list of every task, but I never attempt to finish it. Instead, I identify exactly 3 to 5 high leverage activities that will actually advance my vision. If these 3 are completed, the day is a strategic victory. Everything else is simply a bonus. Success isn't about doing everything. It's about doing the right things at the precise moment they are required. This shift in focus leads directly to the 4th habit, the capital time arbitrage. Most people believe that wealth is a product of high intelligence or massive initial capital. The data suggests otherwise. A landmark study by JP Morgan found that investors who contribute less total capital but start earlier often end up with significantly more wealth than high earners who start late. The most powerful driver of your net worth isn't your income, it's time. This is the ultimate cheat code in the financial system. Yet most beginners ignore it because they are waiting for a perfect entry point. They wait for the raise, the bonus, or the market correction. They are waiting for a moment that the system will never grant them. The sovereign move is to bypass the hesitation and start the compounding process immediately, even if it's with $10 or $20. You aren't just saving money, you are buying time, the only non-renewable asset. By utilizing low-cost index funds, you tether your future to the growth of the global economy. Because this is the foundation of everything we build, I'm hosting a specialized live workshop on February 1st. We're going to move beyond the theory and look directly at the mechanics of how to build an automated wealth engine in 2026. This isn't just a lecture, it's a system deep dive where I'll be showing you exactly how to navigate the current market landscape and avoid the architectural errors that keep most people stagnant. Space is limited by design to ensure we can handle direct strategic questions. This leads us to the specific habit that fundamentally altered my trajectory, the 2% rule. Most people fail because they attempt to conquer their entire vision in a single massive leap. They stare at the complexity of their goals and immediately succumb to analysis paralysis. In the Sovereign framework, we don't rely on massive bursts of intensity. We rely on the 2% protocol. There are exactly 1,440 minutes in a day. Allocating just 2% of that time, 30 minutes, to your primary vision is the catalyst for compounding systemic growth. I experienced this firsthand when I walked away from the traditional corporate structure in 2020. My goal was to build a self-sustaining media empire, but the transition was nearly overwhelming. I wasn't just creating content, I was designing a business, managing logistics, and developing a long-term strategy. The more I looked at the total scope of the project, the more I felt a sense of systemic paralysis. It seemed impossible until I stopped looking at the mountain and started looking at the mechanism. I asked myself one question: what is the simplest, most atomic action I can take today to facilitate progress? I broke the vision down into its smallest components and committed exactly 30 minutes of deep focus to them every single day. The power of the 30-minute block is that it bypasses the brain's internal resistance. It feels achievable, so your system doesn't trigger a shutdown. Over a year, this 2% allocation compounds into more than 180 hours of high-leverage execution. That is a massive amount of focused work, especially when you realize that most people spend 0% of their day intentionally designing their future. In the world of wealth and success, extraordinary results are simply the product of ordinary actions performed with relentless, compounding consistency. The reality is that most people spend 0% of their day intentionally designing their future, yet they are surprised when they remain trapped in the same financial cycle. In the Sovereign framework, we understand that extraordinary results are rarely the product of extraordinary intensity. They are the product of ordinary actions performed with relentless, compounding consistency. If you want to outperform the market in 2026, you must stop relying on willpower and start relying on system design. This leads us to the final habit, the systematic removal of friction. If you find yourself procrastinating on a high-leverage task, you don't have a discipline problem, you have a design flaw. You are suffering from operational drag. Research into human behavior confirms that the more barriers you place between yourself and an action, the more cognitive energy you waste just trying to start. Willpower is a depleting asset. System design is infinite leverage. To ensure consistent execution, you must make your most important tasks the path of least resistance. I identified this systemic friction in my own workflow as a creator. My high-value output is filming, but as an introvert, my cognitive battery is easily drained by the performative nature of being on camera. I used to tell myself I lacked the motivation to film, but upon closer inspection, the motivation wasn't the issue. The issue was the friction. Before I could even hit the record button, I had to navigate a dozen micro tasks: assembling tripods, configuring the lighting arrays, calibrating the audio, and syncing the scripts. Each one of these minor hurdles acted as a tax on my energy. By the time the camera was ready, my system was already in a state of resistance. The Sovereign fix wasn't to try harder, it was to re-engineer the environment. I invested in a permanent studio configuration where every light, microphone, and lens is pre-calibrated and tethered to a single activation point. I transformed a 2-hour setup process into a 5-second transition. By removing the micro barriers, I shifted the default state from "I should be doing this" to "I am already doing this." When you eliminate the friction, consistency becomes the baseline, not the exception. If you are serious about scaling your vision in 2026, you must audit your environment and ruthlessly eliminate every micro task that stands between you and your high leverage work. I shifted from a reactive workflow to a permanent high readiness environment. I allocated capital to engineer a plug and play infrastructure where every component, the lighting arrays, the audio capture, the optics, is locked in a static state of readiness. Now, the transition from idea to execution is instantaneous. By eliminating the micro decisions of a setup process, I removed the opportunity for my brain to negotiate. I moved from the aspiration of "I should be filming" to the objective reality of "I am filming." The lesson is simple. If you want to scale in 2026, you must stop fighting yourself and start designing environments that make your success inevitable. But there is one final system bug you must address. Even with the perfect protocols in place, you may still suffer from the psychological lag of feeling behind. You might look at the global economy or your peers and feel that no matter how hard you optimize, you will never bridge the gap. This sense of being financially behind is more than a feeling, it is a cognitive exploit that keeps you trapped in a scarcity mindset, preventing you from actually seizing the opportunities of the present. If you want to understand how to bypass this mental barrier and recalibrate your perception of wealth, you need to watch this next video. I'll show you exactly how I broke out of that state of mind to finally achieve the escape velocity that led me to where I am today.